There are instances in life that redefine everything, and when you reflect, you realize they began as something seemingly ordinary. My story started just like that. My stepson, Liam, and I were spending what felt like an uneventful evening in the living room. Since Marquez's passing, this house had been enveloped in silence for 2 years. I had been striving to piece my life back together, never noticing or perhaps refusing to acknowledge that Liam had grown up. We were watching a movie filled with action and moments of romance. Liam was sprawled on the couch beside me, his arms stretched casually over the backrest, exuding a sense of ownership. For the first time, I saw him differently. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more chiseled. He wasn't a boy anymore, but a grown man. I quickly dismissed the thought, reminding myself he was my stepson. Little did I know that such reminders would fail me that evening. As the movie's intensity grew, Liam shifted slightly, leaning his arm on the back of the couch and moving closer. It felt like he wanted to say something but hesitated. For a fleeting moment, our eyes locked. In his gaze, I saw a depth that unsettled me. I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself it was nothing. Just a movie, just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew my emotions weren't deceiving me. During a romantic scene, I felt his breath faintly graze my cheek. Before I realized it, he had leaned in closer, his hand on the couch nearly touching my shoulder. I couldn't tell if he was about to reach for me, but his proximity left me in turmoil. It was both unsettling and thrilling, a sensation that terrified me. My mind raced faster than I could comprehend. "Cassidy," he murmured, his voice low and uncertain. "I need to tell you something." I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "Yes, Liam?" I responded, my voice trembling. I want to thank you," he began, his words hesitant. "After Marquez died, you were always there for me. You didn't have to be, but you were. Because of you, I never felt alone in this house." His words hit me like a wave, leaving me vulnerable. "Of course, Liam," I replied with a forced smile. "I'm glad I could be here for you." But he didn't break eye contact. "Me too," he said slowly, his voice deepening. "Being around you makes me feel at peace." The atmosphere grew heavy, and he must have sensed it as he pulled his hand back slightly. Yet his gaze remained fixed on mine. My heart was racing, my thoughts in disarray. I tried to maintain some distance, but something had already shifted. The realization struck me. Liam was no longer a boy. That truth would reshape everything. That night, Liam's demeanor toward me felt warmer, more vulnerable. For years, I had been like a maternal figure to him. But the man sitting next to me that evening, tall, broad-shouldered, and undeniably attractive at 19, was no longer the little boy I once knew. Even so, I clung to the thought that he was still my stepson, desperately trying to suppress the confusing emotions stirring within me. However, I didn't realize how fleeting my resolve would be. The depth in Liam's gaze that night left me defenseless, his newfound warmth creating a storm of emotions within me. I had no way of knowing how close we were to crossing an uncharted boundary, one that would alter the course of my life forever. If you enjoy hearing personal confessions like mine, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. I promise this will be one of the most gripping stories you've ever encountered. A few days after that evening, I noticed Liam behaving differently. At breakfast, he was more talkative, his gaze rarely leaving me. He began helping around the house in ways he never had before. One morning, as I swept the floor, he walked over and took the broom from my hands. "Let me help you," he said firmly. Startled, I stared at him. Liam had never done anything like that before. "You do so much for this house," he added, his eyes meeting mine. "You're just one person. Someone needs to support you." His words caught me off guard and touched me deeply. "Thank you, Liam," I said softly, my voice betraying a slight tremble. Inside, a warmth spread through me, his acknowledgement of my solitude resonating deeply. Later that day, as I cooked in the kitchen, I felt his eyes on me. He leaned against the counter, watching me intently. His gaze wasn't what I was accustomed to. It lingered on my hips, my back, my hair. At first, I thought I was imagining things. "You're overthinking it," I told myself, but the intensity of his look was undeniable. I tried to act naturally, yet deep down, I couldn't ignore the subtle thrill it gave me. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that. When Liam left the kitchen, I found myself drawn to the mirror. Staring at my reflection, I realized that even in my 40s, I still had an allure. My figure was slender, with well-defined hips and a toned frame that I maintained through consistent workouts. My light brown, wavy hair cascaded gently over my shoulders, framing my face in a soft, flattering way. My chest, too, seemed to defy the passage of time. It had been ages since I truly looked at myself like this, and in that moment, something stirred within me. Something was shifting, though I couldn't fully grasp what it was. As days passed, Liam's behavior became increasingly noticeable. His gaze seemed fixed on me, and whether through a casual touch or a simple remark, he began to test the boundaries between us. Strangely, the most troubling part was how much I found myself enjoying it. After that encounter in the kitchen, the thought lingered in my mind as I lay in bed that night. Liam was no longer a boy. He had grown into a mature, striking man. What unsettled me even more was how much this realization thrilled me. Deep down, I sensed that everything was heading toward an inevitable moment, one I wouldn't be able to undo. One evening, I returned home to find a sight that left me speechless. Candles were lit all around, flowers were carefully arranged, and the table was set beautifully. The atmosphere was intimate and romantic, so much so that I could hardly believe it was for my birthday. It felt like the kind of gesture reserved for a lover. When Liam walked into the room to greet me, everything made sense. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers, he looked polished and confident in a way I hadn't seen before. He exuded charisma, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. "I wanted to make this day special for you," he said with a faint smile, handing me a box. Opening it, I was taken aback to find a striking red dress inside. It was bold, with a soft texture, a plunging back, and a high slit. The elegance and daring design filled me with equal parts excitement and hesitation. "You picked this out for me?" I asked, surprised. "Of course," he replied smoothly. "It's your birthday, and I thought you should have something that truly suits you. I know it'll look stunning on you." I carried the dress to my room, standing before the mirror as I held it against my body. The soft fabric brushed my skin, awakening feelings I hadn't experienced in years. As I slipped it on, I realized how perfectly it accentuated my figure, with the high slit showcasing my legs and the open back highlighting the curve of my waist. I studied my reflection in silence, marveling at how the dress made me feel. After a while, I whispered, "This is insane. I'm dressing up for Liam, but I do look amazing in this." Taking a deep breath, I left the room and made my way to the living room. When Liam saw me, his gaze locked onto me and didn't waver. The admiration in his eyes was unmistakable, and it made the moment feel even more surreal. "You deserve the credit," I said with a smile. "This dress is stunning." But I quickly looked away, feeling self-conscious under his intense gaze. "I was right," he replied, his voice steady. "You look breathtaking in it." His directness made my heart race, but I tried to dismiss the feeling. "You're exaggerating," I said lightly. Liam guided me to the elegantly arranged table, where 2 wine glasses and a bottle of red wine awaited. The atmosphere felt surreal, more like a romantic dinner than a birthday celebration, but I said nothing. I allowed myself to be drawn in. He poured the wine as soft music played in the background, and the first sip was warm and sweet on my tongue. We started by talking about the past, about Marquez and the changes in our lives, but as the evening progressed, the conversation grew more personal. "Cassidy," Liam said suddenly, his tone gentle but serious, "how can someone like you be alone?" "I just don't understand." Caught off guard, I met his gaze. "Liam, being alone isn't always a choice. Life has a way of leaving you that way," I replied, but his expression held something deeper. "You don't have to stay alone," he said softly, lifting his glass to take a sip. "A woman like you has needs, Cassidy, and I'm here." His words struck me harder than I expected, leaving me momentarily speechless. I raised my glass and took another sip, but my eyes stayed on him. What was supposed to be a birthday celebration had transformed into something far more complex. Liam set his glass down but never broke eye contact. "You look incredible tonight," he said, his voice low and firm. "I wanted this night to be special for you because you deserve it." I smiled shyly, swirling my wineglass in my hand. "That's really kind of you, Liam. But sometimes I wonder why you've gone to all this effort." He raised an eyebrow, his voice unwavering as he replied, "Because you deserve it. You're not just my stepmother, Cassidy. You're so much more than that." The depth in his tone both surprised and moved me. For a moment we held each other's gaze, the silence between us thick with unspoken tension. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't bring myself to speak, leaving the moment to hang in the air, heavy and unresolved. Liam slowly rose from his chair, walked around the table, and stopped beside me, resting his hand on the table's edge. Leaning closer, he said, "Cassidy, You deserve more than to share your life with someone who doesn't see your worth. A woman like you should never be taken for granted. Liam, I started, but no words came. My thoughts were in turmoil, and just as I tried to respond, Liam leaned in even closer. I can't keep hiding how I feel, he whispered, and before I could process it, his lips were on mine. The kiss caught me completely off guard, flooding me with emotions I hadn't felt in years: passion, warmth, and an undeniable connection. Liam's hand slid gently to my waist, pulling me closer. What began as shock quickly transformed into something I couldn't resist responding to. For what felt like an eternity, our lips stayed locked, as though time had stopped entirely. But suddenly, reality set in, and I broke away, gasping for air. This isn't right, I stammered, my voice shaky. Liam, I need to go to my room. It was all I could manage to say. Liam took a deep breath and looked at me, his voice calm yet burning with emotion. I'm sorry, Cassidy, but I couldn't stop myself from feeling this way. Without another word, I stood up and hurried to my room. As soon as I entered, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart raced as I tried to process what had just happened. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror, which seemed just as shaken as I felt. How did this happen? I whispered to myself. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, and the wine's lingering effects made everything feel even heavier. I lay back on my bed, and as my head hit the pillow, exhaustion from the night's events pulled me into sleep. But the night wasn't over yet. At some point, a faint sound stirred me. My eyes fluttered open, and I noticed a shadow at the door. Slowly, it opened, and Liam's silhouette appeared in the dim light. Cassidy, he whispered, his voice soft but resolute. My heart pounded as he stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. I know I shouldn't be here, he admitted, his tone low and filled with determination. But I can't help it. His gaze locked onto mine, and I could see the intensity in his eyes. My chest tightened as my heart raced even faster. I knew I needed to say something, but as I looked at him, years of buried emotions surged to the surface. I know I need to give you an answer, Liam, I said, my voice trembling but unfiltered. I feel the same way, and I want you. Liam's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and joy. Seeing his reaction gave me a sudden surge of courage. A soft smile spread across my face, and I closed my eyes momentarily to compose myself. Please, I whispered, barely audible, before I lose my nerve. My hands moved to my shoulders as I slowly slid the delicate straps of my dress down. The fabric slipped from my body, pooling at my feet, leaving me standing there. Liam's breath caught as he took in the sight, the admiration and desire in his gaze unmistakable. Without hesitation, he moved closer. His lips met mine again, this time with a passion so intense it felt as though the world around us had vanished. His hands wrapped around my waist, pulling me firmly against him as the kiss deepened. When we reached the bed, he carefully guided me down onto the mattress, his eyes never leaving mine. The weight of his body over mine made me surrender entirely. Liam quickly pulled off his shirt and tossed it aside, then leaned over me, his expression filled with determination and unrestrained desire. His fingers gently traced my cheek, then found my lips again. In that moment, all the barriers we had built between us over the years crumbled entirely. For the first time in over 2 years, I felt alive, completely present in the moment. As Liam continued, I gripped the sheets tightly, my breath hitching. Closing my eyes, I let myself get lost in the overwhelming tension and excitement coursing through me. When I opened my eyes and looked at him, his flushed face and broad shoulders stirred something primal within me. Unable to resist, I reached out, my nails grazing his back in a fleeting moment of passion. Liam's heartbeat quickened, and I felt it beneath my palm as I placed my hand on his chest. Finally, he let go, surrendering to the moment completely. Breathless, he lay beside me, and we drifted into quiet conversation about romantic things until I fell asleep. That night changed everything. I realized my life was about to take an entirely new direction. What I experienced that evening brought me more joy than I'd felt in years, but I knew it was only the beginning. If this story has captivated you, stay tuned for what comes next. It's far from over. Don't forget to follow, turn on notifications, and leave a comment. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss a moment of it.